What's happening, all you wonderful people? Hope you're taking care of yourselves. Hope y'all are having a great day. My name is Sammy, and welcome to another long-awaited, for some of you, another statue review. When I first started this channel, statue reviews are what I did. I got into this, hobby and was like, hey, these things are cool. I want to review them. And I used to do statue reviews for a long time, and then, my channel kind of became something else as I started collecting statues less and less. But every once in a blue moon, the stars align, and I bless your feed with a statue review, and that's what I'm doing right now, like right now. So thanks for stopping by. Hope you enjoy the review. This in front of me is the quarter scale Ultimate Logan custom statue. I'm going to start with objective facts about this piece before I get into the review, which is going to contain, of course, subjective thoughts. This is a quarter scale statue in a simple museum pose depicting Logan. This is supposed to be, as you can see, this isn't Wolverine in his, classic yellow suit. It's actually, it's not Wolverine in any of his X-Men suits. It's just supposed to be, I don't know what Ultimate Logan means. I just know that it's Logan. This statue was sculpted by Angad Singh. It's limited to, I believe, 70 pieces. The only reason I'm unsure of that is because this in front of me is an artist proof. So on the base, it just says 2 out of AP. It doesn't say, and even on the certificate of authenticity, it just says 2 out of AP. What leads me to believe it's 70 is because on the box, which you cannot see, on Sharpie, it says 2 out of 70. So that's what's leading me to believe 70. So we'll limit it to 70 pieces. I believe that the original price for this statue was $800, not including shipping, of course. We all know how shipping is for custom statues, but even for this isn't, I can't imagine shipping for this would have been something crazy. I didn't pay that much for shipping on this, which actually leads me to my next point. We're kind of done with the facts about the statue now. Oh, it was proto painted by Louis Villamar. And one final piece of crucial information before I get into the review. This statue was free for me. I only paid shipping for this thing. In one of the statue groups on Facebook, objectively the best statue group on Facebook, there was a little Christmas kind of competition that went on, make a post, put this hashtag, the generic stuff. And I said, fuck it, why not? Make a post, put a hashtag, and a month later I get announced as the winner for this statue. So the statue was free to me, but I'm also going to review it as if I did pay for it. I'm going to review it as if I did shell out the 800 plus shipping for this statue, meaning I'm going to point out its imperfections, its perfections. This isn't the kind of review where I get a free statue. Hey, this was sent to me for review, and I start kissing its ass. Not going to happen. I'm going to review this as if I bought it. That's probably the best way to approach something like this, right? So that being said, let's get into the review. So for the sake of concision and for organizing my thoughts cleanly, and so I don't get scatterbrained, we're going to split up this review into a few different segments. We're going to talk about first the concept of the piece, the sculpt, the paint, and then closing thoughts, which include, execution, engineering, kind of runaway kind of thoughts that wouldn't fit into one of the aforementioned categories. So yeah, it should be fun. Stick around, grab a drink, grab a snack. I got my coffee. Yeah, and let's go. So starting with the concept, it's a pretty simple concept. This will probably be the shortest segment of this review. This statue depicts Logan standing in a museum pose on a simple rock base. On the base, there's a few elements to make it not, so plain and one-dimensional. You have the skull of what's this animal? Ibex? Is that what this would be? It's a thing with the curved horns. Is it called an ibex? I think. I could look it up and cut that out of the review and just pretend I know it by heart, but I'm not going to do that. I think it's an ibex. I'm going with my first instinct. There's also, there's some tree bark or a fallen tree log or tree trunk here on the base as well as some random bone, just one little bone. I would imagine it was part of the body of this ibex. Whew, there's probably going to be some wildlife biologists watching this video and cursing at their screen, but listen, integrity. I could look it up. I'm not going to. I'll look it up after the review. I guess as far as concept for the base goes, maybe I would have liked to see one or two more bones. I mean, it is kind of strange having just the skull and then some random thigh bone. But I mean, it's no big deal. This is obviously very intentionally supposed to be a simple museum pose piece, so I can appreciate the simplicity of a base like this. The rest of the statue, I mean, you see it. I guess the concept is simple on this one. Logan standing in museum pose, little victory pose with his claws. There's switch outs, obviously, that can change the look and or change the feel of the statue and change the vibe it gives off. But no matter what combination of heads and arms you put on this thing, it doesn't change the fact that it's a simple museum pose. And I like that. You know, when I first got into the hobby, and I'm sure many of us, you know, when people first get into statue collecting, it's easy to kind of get carried away and obsessed with these large, extravagant, dynamic poses with bases that are almost more elaborate than the character themselves. And don't get me wrong, I have a great appreciation for statues like that. They're, you know, they're, when done well, they're a feat of engineering and conceptualization. But in my opinion, a well done museum pose statue is just as impressive as a well done, dynamic, extravagant statue. You know, it's all about how it comes together. And so I can appreciate the simplicity of a museum pose like this. There's so many Wolverine statues on the market with so many variations, licensed or custom. You know, there's so many Wolverine statues that in a sea of crazy concepts of Wolverine statues, a simple museum pose one kind of does stand out, honestly, you know? Wolverine has some battle scars, some scars on, you know, some open wounds on his chest, open wounds on his arms, or some wounds on his back as well. And I apologize, I usually have my statues on a Lazy Susan when I review them, but both of my Lazy Susans are currently occupied in my display upstairs, and I didn't want to, I was too lazy to like take them from the statues there that they're both under, because those statues are big and extravagant and crazy, and I didn't feel safe lifting them up, but it's okay. So yeah, scars on his back too. He's smoking a cigar in his classic Wolverine posture. One of the other heads has a cigar as well. We'll get into switch outs and all this stuff at the end. So yeah, I mean, that's it as far as concept goes. I mean, there's not much more to be said. Simple outfit, simple base, simple pose. Everything about the concept of this statue is simple, which is, again, not a bad thing at all. I mean, when done well, a simple statue can stand out in a display just as much as a crazy statue, in my opinion. So let's move on to the sculpt of the piece now. Now, again, this was sculpted by Angad Singh. I'm being completely honest. I'm not familiar with him, and I don't know what else he has sculpted. Again, I didn't really have like an interest in buying this statue. Now, I wasn't following the production of this piece. I just happened to win it, you know? And so here we are. I'm reviewing it. So I'm not familiar with Angad Singh's other work, but I think he did a pretty good job on Wolverine. Where it needs to be, you know, detailed and meticulous, it is. You know, for example, the skull on this base is probably one of the best sculpted pieces on this entire statue. There's a great contrast in the textures of the skull. It's sculpted as if it has been sitting out in the heat of the desert for hours or a whole day. There's a lot of varying textures in this small, you know, in this small little piece, and it doesn't come off, obviously, otherwise I would have taken it off to show you. You know, it's a good sculpt, whereas the rest of the base is sculpted and painted, but, you know, we'll get into paint, but whereas most of the base is sculpted pretty simply and basic with just some, you know, basic rocky rubble texture, these added elements to the base are sculpted, you know, have a bit more to the sculpts that help them stand out. Really wish I had this on a Lazy Susan, but thankfully it's a simple piece, so spinning it around is not that, you know. As far as the sculpt on Wolverine goes, I think the same kind of assessment can be made. It's detailed where it needs to be detailed. You know, the clothing, for example, is, you know, whenever I see fully sculpted clothing on a statue, of course, I always prefer full sculpt to mixed media. But, you know, you got to make sure you're sculpting it pretty well. You don't want your clothing to come off looking, it could, you know, it can ruin the whole piece if your clothing is a basic sculpt. And thankfully, it's not really the case here. You know, these jeans, you know, from a distance, one might be fooled into thinking this is mixed media. And that's a compliment, in my opinion, because these jeans have enough folds and ripples and textures and small little rips and holes in them as like a normal pair of jeans would. The way pants would naturally fall and fold over your legs, the sculpt is all there and it communicates this effectively. It could have been just a flat, simple sculpt down the leg, but that would have, in my opinion, ruined the piece. But it is sculpted well in this regard, and the stitches and the pockets, and they look like jeans, you know what I mean? They're sculpted well. And that includes the shirt, the same can be said about these folds and the way that the textures kind of fall over the clothing, rips, holes. It all looks, natural. You see, when you're gonna sculpt a museum pose, when you're gonna sculpt a simple statue, people are going to analyze it in a different way than they would a dynamic piece. But they're going to be, I mean, maybe I'm just speaking for myself. Maybe you guys disagree. But with a dynamic piece, you kind of look at the whole thing and this crazy base and this character bending over backwards and putting his arm under his leg and twisting and somersaulting. And you look at the whole thing and you're like, wow, what a crazy freaking execution. But there's not much to analyze on a simple museum pose piece aside from the character, right? So your eye is going to be drawn to those subtleties. On God, who sculpted this, I appreciate that he took these kinds of things into consideration. Same goes for the open wounds. They look three-dimensional. I mean, it's on a three-dimensional statue, of course, but the wounds have dimension to them, which is augmented also by the paint, which we'll get into, but the sculpt of the wounds is effective, in my opinion. They don't come off as flat, basic afterthoughts of wounds. No, I mean, they come off as yeah, there's the scratches on Wolverine, and they are deep cuts, right? As far as anatomy goes, look, there are people in the community that can pick out every single muscle fiber in the human body and can apply it to a statue, and they know what they're talking about in this regard. I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm not the kind of person who is familiar with every single muscle in the human body, so that should be said. But at the same time, I think I do have an eye for what would make a good anatomical sculpt. And I think this falls under that umbrella. I think that the veins especially are raised and sculpted. I always appreciate raised veins when they're sculpted. I judge anatomical sculpts like this just based on the dimension. How much do they pop? Wolverine is you've never seen a scrawny Wolverine. Wolverine is, of course, a pretty jacked, muscular guy. So you need to communicate that in the sculpt. And that gets across just fine, I think. I think it's towing the line between almost a bit too exaggerated. I mean, looking at it head on, it is a comic book style exaggeration. It's not as if this is like some Rob Liefeld based sculpt here, but I do appreciate the anatomy of this piece. I appreciate the posture too. I mean, look at the skull, look at the side view. Everything kind of pops. Portrait is sculpted pretty well too. Sculpting hair is, it's never something that's like really easy to do. And I think the hair here is sculpted as, could it have been done a little bit better? I do think so, but I'm also not really going to complain because I do realize that hair, especially like exaggerated, stylish hair like this, is not always the easiest thing to sculpt. I do like the little scar on his eye, which is not just painted. The scar on his eye does have it is sculpted in. Basically, what I'm getting at here is that all the little features and details that you see on this finished piece are they're painted over an existing sculpt. The wounds aren't just painted on, the eyebrows aren't just painted on. Everything is sculpted and it's done really well. The weakest part, I'd say, is the eyes themselves, but that's more to do with the paint job of the piece, which I think it's honestly time to talk about the paint, right? Well, so let me take a coffee break real quick. You guys put oat milk in your coffee? I started putting oat milk in my coffee recently. Better than cow milk. I still drink cow milk, but oat milk in the coffee. It's the way to go. Trust me. All right, so let's talk about the paint job of this piece, shall we? The paint job, I'll come out and say it right now, is, I think, the weakest part of this statue. I think that the statue, if it had a more detailed, maybe a more meticulous, maybe a more precise paint job, this statue would have been phenomenal, I think. As is, it's not bad, but I see areas where it could have been a lot better, and it's just, you just kind of think, it's like, what could have been? And again, I got this thing for free, I shouldn't really be complaining, but I want to review it from the perspective of someone who, paid the money for this thing. What's the point of reviewing the statue if I'm just going to be like, you know what, I got it for free, so I'm not going to complain about this shit. No, I mean, I should point out imperfections regardless. We'll start with the base and work our way upwards, right? So these added elements to the base that I talked about, how the sculpt was so great, so is the paint. The paint job, I don't know, I'm like obsessed with this skull, guys. Like, I really am. I don't know, it is painted and sculpted so well. It has a smooth finish to it. I mean, it really looks like something I'd come across in the desert if I was, for some reason, wandering the desert, It looks so accurate to me. The paint job on the fallen tree trunk on the bone shares similar praises. The paint job on the rock aspect of the base as a whole is about as simple as the sculpt itself. There's not a ton of dimension to the paint on this on the main part of the base. It does just seem like a smooth kind of flat. You just took one color and didn't really add too much dimension to it, with the exception of a little bit of lighter accents around the like cracks and crevices of the rock. So there is dimension in that way. I think it could have been a little. I think the base could have been a little better painted as far as the rocky aspects go, because while there are those accents, there's also a lot of areas where it is just really flat. It's okay. It's not the end of the world, right? But it is something worth mentioning. All right, so moving up from the base, the clothing, thankfully, is painted, I'd say, just about as well as it is sculpted. The paint job on the shoes, the jeans, and the shirt, they all feel different. They all look different. The shirt has a little bit more of a gloss to it. The jeans are more dark, subdued, kind of like denim should be. The shoes have this like rough, faded, but also subtle polish to them. There was attention to detail made on the paint job with the clothing. I can tell you that much, and I appreciate that. The paint job on his wounds, too, is something that stands out. I'm going to go back. I said the wounds were done pretty well, and that can also be attributed to the paint. Whereas the shirt has a very subtle gloss to it, I don't even know that I'd call it gloss. I just know that it's not as subdued as the jeans. But my point is that these open wounds on his chest, on his stomach, on his back as well, those have much more of a gloss to them, because they're fresh, open wounds that are going to have, shiny blood. And so that, in my opinion, works wonders to the feel that this piece gives off. You really get the feel that Logan just finished fighting. You know what I mean? And that's thanks to the gloss on the wounds of the paint job, or on the wounds of the paint job, on the paint job of the wounds. Wow, somebody stop me. The wounds on his shoulder here and on the other side don't really share that same gloss. They are a bit glossy, but they're not nearly as glossy as the wounds on his chest. The paint job on the portraits, and look, don't get me wrong, we're going to go into all these switch outs probably after this paint section as I talk about, closing thoughts. I'm going to go over all the switch outs, trust me. But the paint job on the portrait, it's all right. The hair is okay. I mean, it's not really, you're not going to put a ton of dimension to black hair. I get that. Where I think it just falls apart a little bit is those eyes. Those eyes are just not super great. They're okay. I mean, they're not bad, but they're also not really that great. The eyes and he just looks a little, I don't know. He looks a little like sleepy. It's just, he looks drowsy. He looks like he's posing for a picture, and then as soon as okay, picture's taken, he's like, okay, cool, I'm going to bed. Something about it, it doesn't give off the same ferocious attitude that the rest of the piece gives off, which is a shame because the face does. His eyebrow, he's frowning, and he has a scar, and he's smoking a cigar. He's, by all accounts, he is very ferocious, but it's just those eyes, that it's something about those eyes isn't doing it for me. I will say the last thing I'll say about the paint, which I'm surprised I didn't go over this earlier, but obviously the skin tones. The skin tone, I'm not a huge fan of this very flat, almost orange hue. And I'm not a huge fan of the skin. Thankfully the sculpt is what saves it from being just bad, because even though the paint job on the skin leaves something to be desired, the sculpt doesn't. The sculpt almost makes up for it, because you have the veins and the striations in the muscle, and you have the wounds, and the paint job of the wounds is good. There's purple hues around the wound to suggest maybe infection, or it really is just a skin tone that makes this thing fall short of being perfect as far as the the body goes. You know, I mean, it's a little bit of a shame because the clothing is like painted so well, especially with the wounds and such, that all that was really missing, in my opinion, was just make the skin a little bit more natural looking, and you would have had yourself a real winner. Because also, as it stands, the skin almost blends in a bit too much with the base. As far as paint goes, that's about it. Not horrible, could have been better, especially the skin tones. The skin tones is probably the weakest aspect of it. So let's get into the final section after my coffee break. I'm telling you, oat milk. Okay, so closing scatterbrain thoughts here. So let's really get into the switch outs. In this, by the way, I was not aware of how much you get in this box. When I won the statue, all I had to go off of it was a picture of the statue, and this was like the pose. So I really thought you were just getting, I mean, I guess maybe I expected an extra portrait or something, but I didn't know you get all this shit. So let's get into it, okay? In the box, you get a certificate of authenticity. If I'm being honest, I mean, I don't mind that it's included, obviously, but it does seem kind of like cheap and almost like an afterthought. Nothing on here is really very sharp. The printing is pretty, I mean, blurry. Funny thing about this is that it doesn't say custom statue. It doesn't say custom quarter scale statue. It says fan art quarter scale statue, which I thought the fan art days were over. I thought that was like a thing of the past, but guess not. I guess we're still calling these things fan art. I'm not. Switch outs. So bone claws are one of the options you have for displaying this thing. You can replace both of these arms with the bone claws here, which the only caveat of that is here, you can even see. If you put these things on, you're not going to have one arm. You're not going to have this kind of asymmetrical look to the statue. It's going to be, obviously, you take this out, it's going to be both arms at his side, which isn't bad. It's just something to be considered, because if you want to do bone claws, it's going to look like this. I don't really like it personally. I think it has a lot cooler of an attitude with, one arm flexing. But I imagine that someone who looks like this does not care what I think about their attitude, right? And these bone claws are meant to go with, I mean, you could probably display with that, but they're meant to go with one of these portraits here, which, by the way, I really appreciate that each extra portrait you get has a bust. Again, I didn't expect that. So, I mean, when I took that first layer out of the box and saw the second layer, I was like, whoa, what else is in this statue? All this was like one layer. So bone claws are an option, right? You also have, and by the way, each arm does have its own wounds to it, but they are identical. Like each arm has those 3 scars up top and then that like one little smaller scar at the bottom. So this would have been an opportunity to have a bit more variation in the wounds, but it is what it is. So you get this option as well of Wolverine holding this red sword, which I had never seen before in my life. We had to ask the resident comic nerd in our group, and then I kind of did a bit of research on my own about what the sword is called. Maramusa. Did I say that right? Probably not. But yeah, this has some comic lore to it. I'm not really familiar with it, so I'm never really going to display it with this option. But it is an option nonetheless. And it honestly, I mean, like, objectively does look kind of cool on there. The only thing is, now that I'm putting it on, it's not really staying on that well. Yeah, it's not really, like, staying in there as securely as it should. Whew, you see this? That's not good, folks. Yeah, I would be a little bit afraid, honestly, displaying this. That is not a secure fit at all. I mean, this is the first time I'm, like, displaying it with this thing on, so I wasn't really even aware of this looseness. Yeah, good thing I don't care about this sword, because I would be afraid to display it in there if I did. Credit where credit's due, this is a metallic sword. It is metal. They could have gotten away with plastic, but they didn't. Metal, so it's cool. But I'm never going to display it with a sword. So then you also have, now my favorite display option I'd say is just the classic, and also the claws are metal, of course, too. The claws of these are metal. My favorite display option is just with the classic claws, but I will say that this look has kind of grown on me with Sabretooth's head in the other hand on here. And normally I'm against, like, dead villains incorporated into the statue. But for Wolverine, it kind of makes sense. It makes sense that this guy would be holding his fucking nemesis's head while smoking a cigar. It really just depends on the character for me. There is something shaking in this arm. I mean, it's not, like, unheard of where you get loose pieces, like, inside a statue piece. I mean, Sideshow has done, licensed companies do this. And as far as Sabretooth's head goes, it's done pretty well. This hair is not like polystone, I don't think, because it does have some flex to it, which honestly, thank God it does. Otherwise, this would have arrived definitely broken. Painted pretty well, some scars on there. I mean, let's pop it on there. Pretty good. I like this display. I mean, this display option is growing on me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna be completely honest. In fact, I'll keep it on there just for right now. So that's it as far as the arms go. These are the portraits you get, and I mean, I like all four of them. This is my favorite because, actually, I'll tell you why. There's one crucial reason that that's my favorite. But anyway, I'm glad you can at least display the extra portraits on the busts, because anytime I get statues with switch outs, arms or whatever, I don't give a fuck. The arms can go in the drawer. But I always feel it's always like a shame to me putting portraits in a drawer. I'm like, man, these are expressive like heads. I'm just putting them in the drawer. So when companies include busts like this, immediately that elevates the statue tenfold for me, because it makes it part of the display. So major credit where credit's due is the fact that these have busts. Anyway, this is one of the heads you get. When I got this little extra hairpiece was broken. My girlfriend glued it back on for me because there's no way I would have been able to. It's too fucking precise. But this head, it's pretty gnarly. Adamantium, I mean, half of his face exposed with adamantium and blood and muscle fibers. And it's done pretty well, honestly. You can see the individual muscle fibers in this portrait, which in my opinion is what gives it life. If this was just a flat red, it would have been very weak in my opinion. But no, you can see the individual muscle fibers, so props to this head. Not my favorite, though. It's not one I display on there. It looks a bit too gnarly for me. Honestly, maybe this head with that arm wouldn't be a bad idea. Then this is essentially the equivalent of this head, except this is Old Man Logan without the cigar. I guess Logan in his old age decided to give up smoking. Never too late to quit. Major props to you, Logan. Yeah, it's well done. I do like the hair more on these portraits because the gray has a bit more variation to it. It's not the same tone of gray throughout. Still not my favorite portrait. This is short hair with a cigar. This is by all intents and purposes also kind of the same facial expression, just with baring his teeth and a cigar like this one. Shorter hair. These are all cool portraits to have, on display. Something I actually just noticed looking at these busts from behind is there actually is wounds on the back of each one. Pretty cool. I'm never going to see these when I display them, but still kind of cool. This one is my favorite portrait for one crucial reason. These three, I don't know if you could tell already, but these three are looking straight ahead. Straight, right? This portrait, his head is, turned a little bit. So it allows you to display the statue from a few different angles, It can be where his head is looking right on, but the body is poised differently. I like it's such a subtle thing. It's such a subtle little shift, but in my opinion, it works wonders, Because if you were to take this off, I forgot to mention this little necklace that comes with it. It doesn't you just kind of put it on there as if you're putting on a normal necklace. It's not that hard, really. But if you were to display here, let's put my second favorite portrait on there, right? It's good. It doesn't look bad at all. But now all of a sudden, you can't really display him like that. He has to now look right at you, which isn't bad. I mean, what am I really? I'm not even necessarily complaining. I'm just saying that this is my favorite because of the shift. I like being able to display a statue off angle a little bit. And look, maybe this doesn't bother you. Maybe you're like, dude, Sammy, shut the fuck up. Just still display it how you want to. Put whatever head on there. Stop being a little bitch. And you know what? I hear you, but I can't, it's just my preference. I like being able to kind of display it at an angle like this. Gives it a bit more dimension or a bit more life, in my opinion, So yeah, I imagine this video is pretty freaking long by now. I already had to stop one recording and start another because I was filling up my SD card. But that's my fault. I don't empty my SD cards until they're freaking full. It's a bad habit. Don't keep shit on your SD card for longer than you need to. But yeah, this is my review of the quarter scale fan art Ultimate Logan statue. Pretty awesome piece. I mean, I'll say it right now, I probably wouldn't have paid the money for this, but it really comes down to the fact that I'm not a huge Wolverine fan. I do like this portrayal of Wolverine because it's a bit more down to earth and relatable and a human depiction of Wolverine. And I have this displayed with, like, you know, my steelbook for Logan, because I love Logan the movie. But I don't think I would have, you know, bought this. Even if I was a Wolverine fan, I don't know that this paint job is really in it. The skin tones are a big deal for me. They really are. I mean, I'm okay with it because I got it for free. But if I bought this, I definitely would be complaining a lot more about the skin tones. But I did want to review it from the perspective, you know, as if I was a paying customer. Anyway, thank you guys for sticking around and watching this video. Thank you again to the group and the group admins who made this giveaway possible. Thank you guys so much for checking out my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had a good time. Remember, oat milk in your coffee. This isn't sponsored by, like, oat milk or anything. I'm just obsessed with oat milk. That's all. And until next time, who really knows when my next statue review will be, if ever. But you know what? Subscribe anyway, because I do other cool shit on this channel, you know? So yeah, love you guys. Appreciate each and every single one of you. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And take care. Peace out.